Okay, welcome into another Beyond the Arc. He's Brad Botkin. I'm Bill Reiter. All of Milwaukee hates me. We'll get into why in just a man. Fans are the worst, and I feel their pain, but still. Brad, what's up, dude? How was Halloween last night, buddy?
It was good. And Bill, I think you sort of secretly revel in annoying fan bases.
Not secretly.
Yeah. Halloween was good. I had the games on. I went out walking around with my daughter for a little bit, but I did the bowl out on the porch so I could watch the games, pulled the blinds. Kind of a Grinch of Halloween for me.
Good work. And what do the kids go as? What were I was Rick from Rick and Morty. My son was basically.
Oh, you still do the dress up. What a great dad.
Yeah. So my son is 12. He wanted to go out. He wanted to go out with me after he went out with some other people. So it was like, I had to put the mask on, but
my daughter was Taylor Swift, which I'm sure a lot of daughters this year. Yep. But neither of my wife and I are very tall. I'm 5'11". My wife's normal size for a woman. So it's kind of strange that our daughter has grown this early. I think maybe it's the last time she's going to grow in her life, but she's really tall right now for her age and really blonde. Which it's nothing but dark hair in our family, except for my wife's father. Was one shot at her having blonde hair. She got it. And she's also very pale. And I say all this to say that in her Taylor Swift outfit last night, it was like, whoa, she's tall, long leg, blonde, like just very much looked like Taylor Swift. And this is on the heels of, we were talking about this off the air, but for anybody looking for cheap Taylor Swift tickets in the future. Okay. So, of course, my daughter wanted to go to the concert, and I live in Miami, and we were looking at tickets, and she was just here a couple weeks ago. They were between $7,000 and $8,000 per ticket.
Oh, my. Who's buying those?
I know. Well, I think Americans, by and large, are just idiots, and so they'll put anything on a credit card. In Europe, they're not idiots. And so this is what I'm getting to. The demand is just not there at those prices. And so in America, I mean, you got to be kidding me. $16,000 to send my wife and daughter to the nosebleeds. We found tickets in Madrid, Spain, about 3 months ago for $260 per ticket, almost on the floor. And we had airline miles. I ended up sending my daughter and my wife to Spain for 3 days for under $1,000 to go to the Taylor Swift concert. And I was really hesitant to do it because on the surface, it's like I feel like I'm spoiling next thing I know, she's going to be the 16-year-old kid at the Beverly Hills High School driving a Mercedes. It's like, I'm flying my kid to Spain for Taylor Swift. Yeah. But when I explain to people the cost effectiveness, it's funny. When they were there, the people next to them were from Oregon. The people below them were from Chicago.
Well, that's so cheap. $250 is nothing.
Yeah. Everybody has caught on to this. And so it's like, wow, the modern world. You can fly across the ocean and go to a concert for a night and hang out in Madrid for a day. And so this has been the year of Taylor Swift. And that's my story around as she dressed up last night. And it was very cute.
Sounds like a great Halloween. Brad insulting all of America. I apparently have inadvertently insulted all Milwaukee fans. I actually don't revel. I don't revel or secretly enjoy pissing off fan bases. I do enjoy writing accurate things about NBA executives or coaches or players that everyone talks about and no one will say. That I'm happy to do, and that sort of overlapped with my Doc Rivers coverage the last 10 years. Although I think the worm's turned there. I think there's a general sense, or there's not universal belief that Doc is a genius anymore. And I'm certainly a person that people will come to now. Sources are very happy to sort of talk to me about Doc Rivers. So yeah, let's get into this Giannis report. Yesterday, story came out that I spent some time reporting that people around the NBA, and you know how this works, Brad. You talk to various folks. I talk to a lot of people. I talk to a lot of high-level people. I talk to a lot of people in decision-making positions I trust, and it was a universal level of belief that if the Milwaukee Bucks struggle this year, and they were awful last night against Memphis, they're now 1-4, that they think Giannis not only will ask to be traded at some point, that it could very well happen, several sources think, before the trade deadline. So the reporting is a belief in the NBA that Giannis is going to be attainable in the next year, maybe even this season before the trade deadline. A belief that Doc Rivers is starting to expand his reach a little bit into the front office in Milwaukee, which is typical for sort of how Doc operates, and that could create some messiness. There are two teams, which we'll talk about later. We can get into the details, but there's I have heard that Giannis wants either the Nets or the Heat. And I actually, when these stories go well, usually after they come out, Brad, people will call me. I feel that a lot of phone calls that just came in yesterday from executive sources, some GMs saying, you got it right. And one guy said, how did you know about Brooklyn and Miami? That's right. So we'll kind of get into the possible trades that are out there. There's a lot to unpack here, but the main thing for me is if I'm Giannis and I'm about to turn 30 years old, and one executive yesterday said something to me that really caught me. He called me after the story came out and said, you should add next time you talk about this, that normal people have midlife crises at 40, he told me. It's well known that players have them at 30. You turn 30 and it's like, I'm going to get older. These skills are going to go away. You sort of look around, right? You're talking about Giannis turning 30 in December. The team looks like an absolute mess. Are you trusting, if you're Giannis, are you trusting Doc Rivers with your legacy for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years?
No, certainly not in this context either, because if any coach requires the right roster to get it done, all of the Doc pushback, I thought that was actually one of the most interesting parts of your report was the influence that he's starting to weave behind the scenes there. And it does make sense. But I think there's about 4 or 5 coaches in the league that move the needle. Now, I don't think that makes Doc Rivers or Chauncey Billups or insert coach X here a bad coach. I just think it makes them roster dependent, like 90% of coaches. So unless you're Spoelstra, I think to some degree Kerr, Popovich, there's maybe I'm a Kerr guy as much as I
got it.
But I just know Doc's not going to think that he was going to come in last year. Adrian Griffin was 30-13, and he was just going to completely change everything. Was ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous that the Lakers think JJ Redick is going to change everything. It just doesn't happen. There's not very many examples of it. So no, I would not be trusting that because you made a coach change and you have the same roster, an aging roster. Brook Lopez is going to go down. Chris Middleton, thinking he's going to come back off ankle surgery. Yep. He's already a diminished version of himself. We've seen him in individual decline. He's not going to come back and completely move the needle. They've lost 4 straight games by double digits. And I got to tell you, Bill, last night, coming off a report like you put out, when you start to see teams that have given up, and that becomes sort of a low-hanging fruit.
Abdicated any effort early on.
And it's easy to say that when things are going bad. Oh, they've given up. It's kind of a cliche thing to say. They're not playing for the coach, whatever. That team last night had no interest in playing, no interest in playing together, no interest in defending, no interest in moving the ball. They're not shooting. They're not sharing. They're very low in assists. Their defensive and offensive rating. Their defensive rating is hanging by a thread only when Brook Lopez is on the hit. It's still a bottom 10 unit. This is not a good team. The Damian Lillard
not a good team.
Go well because Damian Lillard's not what he used to be. We can get into a lot of the basketball reasons, but no. To answer your your question in long, if I was Giannis and my main concern was winning more championships, Milwaukee would not look like a very good place to do that right now.
All right, let me give you 2 thoughts, and this is based on reporting. And look, for people that are watching live, and there's a bunch of you right now, and we appreciate you. You can always check out the podcast wherever you get your podcast, and you can watch us live every day at noon on YouTube. Thank you for being here. Like, subscribe, tell a friend, give us a 5-star review. However you're consuming the show, let people know about it. Look, I'm not a Doc Rivers guy, and I've done a lot of reporting on Doc Rivers that goes back many, many years when he was with the Clippers. But I've also become a reporter that when people don't like Doc or want to be negative about Doc, they'll come to me. So I have to kind of filter it to make sure that it's accurate, not people trying to settle scores. One of the things that was pointed out to me in the reporting that led to this story, Brad, about Giannis maybe being willing to leave, and certainly that poured in yesterday from people around the NBA who just wanted to talk about my story, who called me, is this reminder that when things go badly, there's a strong belief out there that Doc Rivers starts to create a toxic environment. He'll throw guys under the bus. We saw that with whatever you think of Ben Simmons. Threw him under the bus after that playoff game where he passed up on the dunk. And there's a million examples. So I think that there's a world, and certainly NBA people would tell you, not everybody, but many, that if things go badly, and they went badly last night, Doc Rivers, even if he is a serviceable coach, is not great at creating an environment that turns around a bad culture. They would argue that he adds fuel to the fire. Not great if you're trying to convince someone like Giannis not to force his way out. I also think it's worth reminding people, because people in Milwaukee are really angry, which is ironic because I'm from near there and I like that part of the country and I like that front office. I like John Horst. Not sure how John feels about me today, but I like the GM there. It's worth reminding people that there was a Sam Amick story. Sam Amick, great reporter for The Athletic. He spent time with the Bucks at their training camp and had a piece come out a few weeks ago where, you remember this, Brad? Giannis had a quote that Giannis was talking to a Bucks official with Sam Amick, the reporter there, and Giannis was maybe joking, maybe not. People weren't sure, where he said, if it doesn't go well, maybe they'll trade me. Now, I want your view. My view of this is superstars know, and I've interviewed Giannis, I've been around Giannis, no, great guy, drama-free guy, but he knows the power of his words. He's not slipping up when Sam Amick is standing there with his reporter writing everything down. To me, it was a message. And it was planning to see this was possible. And this anger and frustration in Milwaukee that this report shouldn't have come out, or it's too soon, or no one wants to hear the stuff they don't want to hear. I'm just the messenger. It shouldn't be a surprise to people. Giannis himself a couple weeks ago on the record talked about the fact that if things went badly in this business, he could be somewhere else.
Bill, this isn't the first time he's hinted at this either. There's been
Right.
smoke around this for a while, and he hasn't been afraid to let his voice be heard in less than subtle ways. He's alluded to this on a number of occasions. And so, yeah, and in most cases, you can sort of put two and two together. Things aren't going well with the team behind closed doors, and then you start to really see it on the court. It is early, but I can't emphasize enough how much that team seemed to not be interested in playing together last night.
Awful.
Really, really bad. I mean, no joy, complete disinterest. And so, yeah, I think that the Bucks are at a real crossroads. I think Giannis is at a real crossroads. I think it's justified to start talking about the teams that make sense. I think it has reached that level of conversation point beyond what he reportedly prefers. If the Bucks,
and we're going to get into that in a sec. We're going to do we're really going to dive into that. I think there's one interesting note that I just want to hit on this, and that is the discourse in Milwaukee. And look, Bucks fans, you're all pissed at me. It's fine. I'm not. I was on a radio show there. The guy that I like, he said the view is that people like me are trying to get Giannis to leave. I don't care where Giannis plays. I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Iowa. I'd rather those guys stay in that part of the world. I like it when the NBA is relevant teams there. But the other discourse here, Brad, is this idea, this argument from fans out there, from the local media, that Giannis certainly signed off on Adrian Griffin, and he certainly signed off on Doc Rivers, and he certainly probably wanted Damian Lillard, and this idea that he is responsible for this, and therefore he's going to stay. Let me just remind people watching in Milwaukee or anywhere else, fair, to quote Tombstone, has nothing to do with it. Fair has nothing to do with it. We live in a world where superstars in the NBA are allowed to wake up when they want to, right or wrong, contract or not, and say, I want to be somewhere else. And that's almost always honored in different ways. See Damian Lillard, but they get to move, and they don't have to take responsibility for their decisions. Kevin Durant wanted to be in Brooklyn with James Harden and Kyrie Irving. He's not in Brooklyn. James Harden got pissed off and wanted to be in Philly with Daryl Morey. He's not in Philly. He doesn't even speak to Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey anymore. I mean, this idea that is Giannis culpable somewhat in the Bucks' brutal bet that didn't work, that in part led to Drew Holiday going to Boston and this team being what you described, Brad, which is bad and broken and not liking each other. Yeah, of course he's responsible. They're not going to make these moves without his say so. Does it matter? It doesn't matter at all, right, Brad? I mean, in this world, if you're an NBA superstar, you're not taking the responsibility. You're usually just going somewhere else.
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't matter. And what you're talking about is sort of more on the intangible side. I actually have basketball thoughts on Giannis's culpability in this. But yeah, he's going to get the coach that he wants, and then he's going to get the coach that he wants fired. And, these guys, we've seen LeBron try to be GM and he wants this play. These guys, they play basketball. So this idea that they know the coach that's going to turn it around, or they know the midseason acquisition that's going to turn it around, they generally don't. And so, yeah, he wanted those coaches to come in. Adrian Griffin was doing some weird things, and I thought it was let's go get a big name. And there were basketball justifications for the Damian Lillard trade.
They were good offensively. They were great offensively.
And that's what they're hanging their hat on right now, Bill. If you look at their 5-man unit with Chris Middleton in there, they actually did dominate teams in small samples. And so now they're in their war room in a
That's
panic.
not Doc.
I tend to agree, but they're telling themselves right now that if we get Chris back, we get that starting lineup back together, we can patch this thing together enough to put a face on it and at least let Giannis stick around for a while, quell some of these rumors. That's what they're telling themselves. I don't agree with it, Bill, because I think once you sift past all of what I think is going to become a story, what's going to be drama in the locker room, get past even Doc Rivers and whatever his problems are as a coach, I think there are genuine basketball concerns here. One of them is, and I've actually drawn the ire of some Milwaukee people in the past because I have gone at Giannis about this, and it's not that I don't recognize Giannis as one of the best players in the league, completely dominant force. Of course he is. But Giannis,
amazing player.
He's difficult to build an offense around, bottom line, because he can't play off the ball. He doesn't space. He's a difficult pick-and-roll partner with Damian Lillard because he does not have an innate feel for that short roll pass. What do teams do? Every team does it now. When you have a scoring point guard, you double-team the guy out high. He's got to pass over the top to the guy that sets the screen, and he's now got a 4-on-3. Draymond Green has made a career out of this. But Giannis is not comfortable catching the ball at the foul line and spraying to shooters and making timely, accurate decisions. And so they end up putting Brook Lopez in those actions more, and Giannis stays off the ball. Or they flip it, they give Giannis the ball, and then Damian Lillard, as we saw last year, is not as comfortable operating as an off-ball player. And so it's a really odd connection for what everyone thought was going to be an unstoppable two-man force. And Giannis does present these problems. He doesn't space the floor as a shooter. When all goes to hell, he just puts his head down and barrels through 4 defenders. It's not to say he's not a terrific player, but he is a player that necessitates it is necessary for him to have a particular context in order to completely carry a team offensively. And I think that's showing up because in the absence of that, you need to be Damian Lillard to be superhero. And that's the key here. He's not anymore. His drives have gone down. His shooting has gone down. He's like 20. He's missed 27 of his last 33 threes. So if Damian Lillard,
he's not. He's still amazing. He was the only guy that showed up. Yeah, everybody had 37, 11, whatever it is. There's a lot to unpack here, and we're gonna get into all of this stuff and more. I also want to hit a couple things. Let's get into these trades. Where Giannis wants to go was reported yesterday, as I reported. I got confirmation of that after the story came out, and one executive posited to me a pretty interesting scenario where he thinks maybe Milwaukee says to, if Giannis wants out, says to the big guy, we don't give a bleep where you want to go. So let's get into if Giannis gets to go where he wants, and if Giannis doesn't get to go where he wants, and he eventually forces his way out. We'll do that. We're coming back in just a second here on Beyond the Arc.
Sunday, red-hot QBs take center stage. A showdown in the dog pound. And the stars are set to light up the late afternoon. Now that's a CBS Sports Sunday.
All right, welcome back into Beyond the Arc. I'm Bill Reiter. He's Brad Botkin. We are both senior writers covering the NBA at CBSSports.com. And we're discussing the report I had yesterday about this really overwhelming sense across the entire NBA before the game last night where Memphis kicked the crap out of the Bucks. If things go badly in Milwaukee with this brutal start, there's a belief Giannis could be available, force his way out in the next year. Several sources think it could be before the trade deadline. Friendly reminder, they're 1-4, and they go now. I think it's Cavs, Utah, Knicks, Celtics. I mean, they could, based on the way they played last night, they could be 2-8 or 1-9 through their first 10 games. And as part of this reporting, Brad, a couple things. I want to dive into these trade scenarios and get your view. And I didn't really mention Golden State in the story, but that's a place that's been kicked around. But let me just remind folks a couple things. I had a source. I didn't say Giannis unequivocally wants to go to Brooklyn or Miami. I quoted a source who's a good one who said, so it's in a quote in the story, I've heard those are the places. I will say this, that after the story came out, another source who is closer to the situation and close to people in Giannis's orbit called me and said, how did you know about Brooklyn and Miami? And I said, is it true? And he said, it is. Like, those are the places he's eyeing. So let's start there and then we get into some other teams. the way it was explained to me is that he likes the idea of Miami for all the reasons guys do. And there were some people who were incredulous, especially in Milwaukee, about why it would be Brooklyn. And it was explained to me that basically Sean Marks, the GM, has a relationship with people close to Giannis. He's respected by those people who advise Giannis agents and other folks. And if you just look at their construction of their rosters, other than I think Claxton, most of those deals expire. I think they have massive amounts of cap space next year. Then I think it's even more the year after that, and a ton after that. So the notion being, Giannis wanted to play in New York. The door's probably closed because the Knicks have already constructed a team where they don't need him. It doesn't make sense. They're a contender. But Brooklyn is still in New York City, and they still have the money to bring in guys around Giannis if Giannis were to go there.
Okay, so I got to get to the bottom of why every time somebody becomes available, it's always the Nets and the Heat. What is the deal that is so attractive? And
I have two answers. New York and Miami.
I mean, I've been to New York. I mean, there's a lot.
New York's amazing, dude. Especially you and I are living. You and I don't make 50, 60 million a year. I made a lot less than that in New York. Dude, those are pretty great cities. Look, nothing against Milwaukee. I'm from Dubuque, Iowa. But after you've spent some time on what? New York's the best city in the world, maybe.
Yes, it's just whatever. Okay, so he wants to go to the Nets, and if he does go to the Nets, I would say two things on this. If he even wants to go to the Nets, and this is all very preliminary, but
right
at the end of the day, if he's going to the Nets, he's doing the same thing that Durant and Irving thought they would do. Oh, we got a bunch of cap space. We're gonna put this team together, microwave version, and bring in a whole bunch of stars with a bunch of money. One, who are these stars that are available that you're going to get with cap space? One. And two, if you're going to get somebody via trade, the guys that we end up seeing usually go – Giannis will be the big one. And then you're going to try to supplement him with somebody like Damian Lillard, maybe Jimmy Butler or Brandon Ingram, somebody that is a sort of a big name but really isn't a player that's going to take you to a title talk. And so I think that would be a mistake if he thinks he's going to go over there, pop it in the microwave, and make a contender out of that. And I would say the same thing about Miami. Who are they going – like they would have similar problems in Miami that they have, if not more, in Brooklyn, because he's not a guy that can play off the ball. You can't run your offense through him consistently, and they don't have a shooting point guard that is going to carry them. So you got you to be great defensively with him and Adebayo.
Oh, my God, defensively would be amazing. And Spoelstra's the coach, and you know that's
support that.
Spo, I mean, look, superstar – how do I say this? Superstar players who live in bubbles – and I like Giannis, but Giannis didn't make a good decision in signing off on Adrian Griffin. And maybe he did, and they didn't give it enough time. But he certainly didn't make a good decision in signing off on Doc Rivers. Just because you want something as a star doesn't mean it's a good idea. It doesn't mean – I mean, Kevin Durant wanted to go to Phoenix. They're not winning a championship in Phoenix. So I'm with you. I understand what you think they're going to win a championship in Phoenix?
No, but they look good. They look good.
I know, but it's early. I know. So let's say that Giannis. So here's the other thing. And again, you said it. It's all preliminary. There's still time. The Bucks could turn it around. Last night was not an indication that's coming, but it takes 20 or 25 games to evaluate an NBA team. It doesn't take 5. So maybe I don't think it's turning around. I'm not a Doc Rivers guy. I don't believe in him, but whatever. I could be wrong. If it doesn't work and Giannis asks for an out, the initial source that I quoted in the story at CBSSports.com yesterday about this saying, it's a quote, it's Brooklyn and Miami. I was equally incredulous as you are. And I said to him, why wouldn't Oklahoma City be in the mix as an example, right? Like
now we're talking.
Like Utah has assets, but I don't think Giannis is going to Utah. I think you could sell the Giannis on the idea if you go and you're paired up with Shea and Chet, you are contenders for championships for 5-6 years, right? You're winning
contenders. They might be a dynasty.
They could be. And the guy's response was, and it's in the story, basically, he's probably not going to want to go there, but yeah, you could choose if you're John Horst, who's the GM, or Doc, who I think will have the power by then, it might already, to say, F you, Giannis, I'm going to send you where you want. Where we want, not you. There's 2 models. There's the Portland model where they sent him ironically to the Bucks to create this situation, not to where Damian wanted to go. And then there's the Durant model or the Harden model, or maybe more the Durant model, where he's been able to sort of dictate his terms. If I'm Milwaukee, I'm not trading Giannis to the Nets or the Heat because there's not enough in return. So it's there.
No.
The Thunder would be an obvious option. Who else is out there? Golden State.
We got to talk about Golden State, but I got to touch on this topic for me. I cannot stand this idea. And maybe I could get behind if Rich Paul's starting to exert this sort of influence, but for the most part, and I'm not as plugged in, in the back rooms as you are with teams, and I know there's a lot of politics that goes on, and you piss the wrong people off, the wrong agent. I'm not privy to all of that. Crap. But the bottom line is this idea that you paying these guys whatever, some of them are making $300, $400 million, and now you also owe it to them to blow your franchise up.
I agree, but
get rid of the player. They're probably never going to have another Giannis in Milwaukee. They have one shot if they do trade him to get an absolute haul for him. And now you owe it to him what? Because other players are going to say, oh, I didn't like the way they treated Giannis on his way out, therefore I'm not going to go to Milwaukee. Give me a break. You get the best deal you can get. You go full Danny Ainge on this. If that's the case, it is not Brooklyn. It is not Miami. I would be knocking on OKC's door for 10,000 picks. I'd be looking at, I don't know, Cason Wallace, maybe Jalen Williams. And
Jalen Williams is a must. Jalen Williams is
a ton of picks. And if Giannis wants to win, yes, because you've got and I can't stress this enough, Damian Lillard did not prove to be this player, but you have got the playmaking point guard that can facilitate in a way that he doesn't have to play barrel ball through four walled up defenders. And that's very, very important.
And Brad, they're already a top defense in the NBA. They're a top 3 offense and a top 3. I mean, the Oklahoma City Thunder are a no-brainer. The thing is, and I don't have the answer to this. I'm going to posit something that is critical variable that I can't tell you what's what. Having lived in Milwaukee, is he okay living in Oklahoma City?
I don't
Oklahoma
care.
City is the smallest. I know you don't care. So it becomes the pressure and are you able to stare him down? The other thing is, and I don't have he won a championship, right? It's not like he's forcing his way out the way Durant did, where he went into Brooklyn, didn't really do anything other than wear a shoe that was too big that cost him a chance. And so that is the internal politics you're talking about. But I'm with you. Milwaukee's not going to land free agents. So real quick, they're not going to land free agents at that level. And so ingratiating yourself to the agents who are going to threaten to withhold basically access to clients doesn't matter. No. The way that it doesn't say Brooklyn. The way that it says it doesn't.
And that's why I say, maybe with the Lakers, I still wouldn't do it. I still think you have to do what's in the best interest. I mean, even in places like New York, LA, where you have this sort of illusion that you have access. I mean, who are all these players? The Lakers been trying to get a third star for 5 years. Even if you're the Lakers, it doesn't just happen. So,
what are you going to offer if you're the Lakers?
So I'm saying this idea that we have to hold up our credibility in this world because we're going to keep getting this flood of talent. It doesn't work like that. And so they would be idiots to do that. How I think, yes, if Giannis wants to win OKC, because you can talk about the timeline, everyone there is young. They are young, but they're ready to win right now. We know that. They're good enough. They're two-way. They have the superstar in place. They have the rim protection. They have the perimeter defense. So Giannis, even though they're all younger,
the coach,
that's actually a boom because that gives them, to your point, a much, much larger window to go at this thing. I would give up so much if I was the Thunder, and the Warriors would be sort of a plan B, and we can talk about the Warriors.
And we should. And I want to say this about the Thunder too, which probably won't appeal to Giannis, but it should. The Bucks are poorly run. I mean, they're a disaster in terms of how they're run.
Just because of
the fact that they're paying 4 coaches, that they entrusted Doc Rivers. I was told it's part of this reporting that the owner there is really, really frustrated with the money that he's losing for the lack of a return. A lot of that, I think, is the coaching salaries. There's just drama there. Oklahoma City, Sam Presti has been that general manager for feels like 112 years. They have a coach who's not going anywhere. It's that team. If you watch these guys, they like each other, right?
Oh yeah.
We talked. It's such a perfect. I know it's in Oklahoma City, which by the way I've also lived in. Great city. It's not New York. Okay. It's the perfect spot if you're Giannis. By the way, Giannis is really great. Obviously, he's amazing. I think he's a top 3 player in the world. He's going to be 30. He's not a shooter. Whenever his physicality wanes, he's not going to be the same player. His window is not the window to impact things as a Steph Curry. He's not LeBron James. And so it's part of the reason I think he's going to leave. The next few years, or other people do, the next few years are critical. And one more thought, and again, a bunch of people after this story came out called me, a bunch of sources, that's like executives and stuff, just to talk about the story. And I got a lot more info. And a bunch of them pointed out to me the reason, I don't think I had this in the piece, the reason a lot of people are talking about this, other than the fact apparently Giannis has sort of put the message out, is it's a generational draft. It's not just Cooper Flagg this next draft. And if you're Milwaukee, to your point, Brad, you have to be able to retain players. You have to be able to get guys you're going to bring in that are going to stay. And you said they may never get a Giannis again. Their best chance is to draft in this upcoming draft. And so that's Oklahoma City's picks, right? It's not the Heat's pick. So there is a scenario where if you're Milwaukee, you can go and you can get real value that you can control for a while. And then there's Lillard. I mean, if you move on from Giannis, you got to trade Lillard too, right? You got to blow the thing up.
And Middleton and Lopez. Yeah, the whole thing comes down. And exactly. And the reason you do this is because they've given up all their draft picks in the Drew Holiday and the Damian Lillard trade. And so they have no equity moving forward. They have, if this thing goes bad, which it has, we can take the if off of this. At this point, it's degrees and how long it's going to last, but it has gone bad to whatever degree you want to rate that. And so, you would start trying to sell for 50 cents on the dollar with Damian Lillard. You would do the same thing with Chris Middleton. And I'm of the opinion, I don't look at sports in this like romantic way of like, oh, he's got to stay with the same team. The only thing as a fan that I don't like is when guys – I hated when Durant went to the Warriors. I don't like taking easy ways out.
Did you really? As a Warriors fan? I hated it too.
Count those 2 championships. I think it's dumb. If I was the best player in my elementary school, the idea that I would gang up with the other 4 best players and say I won the lunchtime – it means nothing. I want to compete. Other than that, this whole like loyalty to one franchise and all, we have to do right by our player. The player has to do right by the team. That's just a false sense of the way the business works. It doesn't make anybody a good or a bad person. Kevin Durant forced his way out to go to Phoenix. And I'll tell you what, Brooklyn didn't necessarily give him his way because they wanted to maintain credibility in the agent world. They gave him his way because Phoenix gave him a hell of an offer. And so that's how it should be with Giannis. And I think that this thing is going to get really, really tense. Now, whether the Bucks will actually have the nerve to trade him, I don't know. But I think this thing's going to turn into a forest fire. I think your report is going to kick off all this talk, and they're not going to start playing better. And this is the foundation of this for me. They got a lot of basketball flaws, and we don't need to go into all of that. But for that reason, unless you have a coach that's going to overcome that, which
and a coaching flaw. I think it's a coaching flaw.
They have, for basketball reasons, they're not just going to overcome this, and that's going to build the fire. I do think it's going to get into sort of a bonfire. Now, whether they actually react to that and pull the trigger and make a trade, I don't know. But I think it's going to get really loud, really uncomfortable. And at a certain point, I think you do need to cut losses in these types of situations. I really, really do. If I 2 years ago, I was saying the Lakers should have traded LeBron. I think there are times when you just have to move.
Yeah, I think you can't do that. You can't. I think you're right in a vacuum, but you can in Milwaukee. There's a different sort of historical reality and sort of a culture of the organization.
But I'm just saying how I feel. I don't feel tied to any of this. Now, I recognize the context is different than that with LeBron, or even Golden State with Steph. But there's a certain amount of time where you've gotten what you can. You've squeezed all the juice you can out of the superstar. You can actually set up your entire next era, or you can just sort of go down in flames in the name of loyalty and romanticism. I don't believe in the latter.
All right, I want to play off that. It's a really good point. Why the Bucks have to turn what people think is the inevitable disaster. It's their nightmare of Giannis asking out to their advantage. That there's a way to do that. Let's also get into Golden State and just whether, because they've been linked with Giannis forever, whether there's a path forward, and then we'll do some bold predictions. All that coming up. More Giannis talk in a moment. We're not going away for long next on Beyond the Arc.
Sunday, red-hot QBs take center stage. A showdown in the dog pound. And the stars are set to light up the late afternoon. Now that's a CBS Sports Sunday.
All right, welcome back into Beyond the Arc. I'm Bill Reiter. He's Brad Botkin. A bunch of you are watching live on YouTube right now. Thank you for that. If you're listening later on the podcast, you can always watch us live if you're feeling it and you're around at noon Eastern. And wherever you get your podcasts, please subscribe, like, tell people about it, give us a favorable review, drop comments, especially on Spotify if you're in there, or if you're live on YouTube, we will incorporate them into the show either now or later. So the Bucks are never going to wake up and decide that they want to trade Giannis. That is their nightmare scenario. And part of the reason I think that the Sam Amick story in The Athletic, that really was, to Sam's credit, at the beginning, that was the first report out there that really touched on what people were talking about. And I like Sam a lot. The only reason I made a bunch of calls about maybe what's up with Giannis is because of Sam's story. And then when they started 1-3 and I sort of saw the schedule. So that's what began it. And Giannis framed it as they could trade me if things don't go well. That's a bunch of crap. This is their nightmare. They don't want to trade Giannis. Giannis will have to ask to be traded. But if you know that's coming, and if everybody else in the NBA knows it, and if I know it, and if you watching Beyond the Arc now know it because you're hanging out with us, the Bucks know it. And Brad, if that's the case, you have to start kicking tires when the deadline gets around, because you have to figure out if Giannis is going to want out, when you can maximize the most you can get. And that might be trade deadline when teams are under pressure. We have talked about a potentially historically complex and competitive Western Conference picture. The Boston Celtics are a juggernaut. I don't care what people say. I think they are. So if you're the Thunder or anybody else, you're eyeing getting ahead of them now or in the next few years. There might just be a world where in February, if they're not delusional of themselves, Milwaukee can say, all right, stuff's gone badly here. We're a disaster. We know Giannis is going to ask eventually. Let's just do it now if we can get the most and not wait till the summer when maybe the temperature's down a little bit in the NBA and the market's not quite as hot.
Totally agree. And that's that's their entire organization's job, is to find the right time to pull the trigger, all of the negotiating tactics, all of the leaking reports and where he's going to go and what they want in return, and that whole dance. They got to get that right. Bill, I don't think in the end they'll do it. I really don't. I think all the reporting is accurate. I think that.
Well, I think he's gone in a year. You don't? Oh, I think he'll be gone.
Do you?
Yeah. I mean, look, if they're a mediocre basketball team, yes. If they start 2-8 and then they win at some point 15 of 17 games, no.
When you put it like that, in a year, I think I would not bet on it happening this year. I do think they should. I'm always in favor of getting ahead of these things. I don't think that they'll have the nerve to do it in the middle of a season that they're going to.
Do you think they're going to be good this year?
No, I don't. But I think they're going to end up being good enough in this age of parity. And I agree with you. The Celtics and the Thunder are way above everybody else. But in this age of convincing yourself that sort of everybody is in the mix if circumstances break your way in the playoffs, which to a large degree is true, I think they can hang around that 5-6 seed and tell themselves
it's not good enough.
It's not, but again, all this is internal dialogue, and so they tell themselves, we get in some circumstances break our way. Last year, Dame got hurt, Giannis got hurt, so it didn't break our way. Maybe somebody gets hurt on Boston this year.
All that matters is what Giannis thinks. Doesn't matter what John Horst or Doc Rivers or Damian Lillard or Pat Connaughton or anyone else thinks.
It sure does.
No, it matters. It matters what Giannis. If Giannis asks to be traded, he'll be traded. Okay. If
Giannis stamps his feet and turns into an Anthony Davis in New Orleans, and I don't think he'll do that. He
can do it. I don't think.
But
they're not going to hold him hostage.
They can still say, and they should say, they should trade him if he doesn't want to be traded, and they shouldn't trade him if he does. It's not.
I would keep him.
I
would keep him. But he's a world class. I'm keeping him in a heartbeat if he wants to stay. I think the problem is he's going to want to go.
That's fine. But this year. Let's say in 2 months, they're hanging around the 6th seed. Okay. Unless Giannis goes and throws a fit, it is what they think they can do internally that they can max. Look, we made the move for Lillard. We gave up all these. We've got to squeeze the last bit of juice. I can see them convince themselves of that. And then in the offseason, it doesn't.
I can too.
Like, okay,
the summer's the more likely. Although a few people I talked to in the initial reporting phase of this were really confident. One person I talked to who thinks they could be in the mix just said he'll be available. And it doesn't mean he will be, but there's just this interesting level of confidence. I want to give a little update on the reporting of the report I gave yesterday in a second. I thought it was interesting. I hadn't thought of this. It came from somebody that called me about the report. But I want to get, so we've talked about the Thunder. They make all the sense in the world. We've talked about the fact that Giannis, I was told by a source, has already identified the Nets and the Heat is the place he'd want to go if he wanted to leave. And then another source confirmed that was true after the report came out. What about Golden State? I mean, they're ambitious. What does that, do you see a realistic path? Again, if Giannis at some point says, it's time, I want to be somewhere else.
Yeah, they obviously can't offer the amount of picks that a team like Oklahoma City or even Brooklyn. You could throw a team like, say, Houston in there that has a lot of young players, probably too many players that might be appealing to a Milwaukee. But Golden State specifically, I told you guys they're a sneaky good team, and I know they've had a crap.
Yeah,
schedule.
you did.
They've had a crap schedule, and so we can't put too much on the result. But they're super deep. They addressed their two-way defense in terms of guys who can play both ways. They're back to connectors on that team. They move the ball with Kyle Anderson. Buddy Hield is
so. But how does it play to Giannis? Like
because they now have enough players. Most would argue too many players actually in the end that they can go out and make a 3-for-1 trade. You throw in every pick you have. You throw in Jonathan Kuminga, a Moses Moody, a Podziemski, who's awesome and I would hate getting rid of. But they have now established value for some really good young prospects, and then they have the picks. Okay. And the reason I bring up the building that Mike Dunleavy has done as a team is that most teams, when they give up all these young players and then they get this guy back, they have no depth left. And we saw that with Phoenix. That would not be the case in Golden State. And you would also address the problem that Damian Lillard has not been able to cover for in Milwaukee for Giannis, is that he's just not a guy that can cultivate enough individual attention other than his barrel through four guys. He can't be an off-ball spacer. But the way, and this is true of Oklahoma City too, these teams that really snap the ball around, they cut, they move, they share the ball. It is impossible to keep track of Stephen Curry running through his labyrinth of screens while also keeping multiple defenders attached to Giannis going downhill. Impossible from a basketball standpoint. And that's what Damian Lillard hasn't been able to do because he doesn't play off the ball like Stephen Curry. That, from a basketball standpoint, the Warriors would be in the upper tier of title contenders with Giannis and Steph, and they have the young players now with the depth to maintain a 7-8 man rotation in the playoffs. I think they would be a very, very viable contender. Very viable.
The window is a little shorter than, say, Oklahoma City, but it's Steph Curry. Sam Quinn pointed out yesterday that guys choose stars to play with, not cities. And there's no better star. The thing about it's a perfect fit with Steph because everybody's a perfect fit with Steph because the gravity of Steph Curry is. So, all right, one more thought, then we can get some bold predictions, or we can keep going. So when the report came out yesterday, it's always as an NBA reporter, the hardest thing is getting these damn people on the phone, right? Even the people that you know really well, and you know that something hits when they start calling you, right? When they start calling you. And so I got a bunch of extra reporting yesterday, and somebody made a really interesting point. I talked to a bunch of folks, and one of them has worked with Doc in the past and made the point, because I think I wrote or said somewhere that once you move on from Giannis, if that were to happen, you got to move on from Damian Lillard. You got to move on. You basically tear it down. And I said this to the guy. We're talking. He goes, dude, you're thinking of it wrong. You're thinking of it if you're a GM who's good at their job, who's putting the organization a little bit first. If you're John Horst, that's what he said to me. He's like, Doc Rivers is a survivor, and Doc has power there. And if Doc's in charge, Doc's not going to sign up for a rebuild that takes 2 or 3 years. He's not going to want to have to explain. And Milwaukee is kind of a market that is sort of always, you have to be in the playoffs, even if you're the 7 seed or the play-in guy team, or the team that the market kind of forgets about you, and you've trained that fan base. This person pointed out, to expect to be good. And the point was, he's like, you Doc Rivers, if he's the guy in charge, isn't tearing it down. If Giannis wants to go, he's gonna pretend that Giannis was the problem. That's what he said to me. He's gonna plant stories that Giannis didn't want to be there. He's gonna build around Dame and try to be the 6th seed every year. Doesn't mean it's true, but it was an interesting perspective in his work with Doc, who was like, you're talking about what should happen, But just like Giannis may not do what he should do, he may try to go to the Nets because he wants to. The Bucks, if Giannis goes away, if Doc's in charge, maybe should tear it down. But that doesn't mean that Doc will make the right decision if we get to that point.
Interesting. I can see that. I think very plausible scenario there. I can see that. And look, Doc has not been a statue of accountability. You know, immediately upon inheriting this job, he immediately went and said he wouldn't wish it basically on his worst enemy, that it was the hardest thing ever. Yeah, totally. Inheriting Damian Lillard and Giannis out there.
Complex.
I can't imagine a more difficult situation to come into in a 30-13 team with two superstars. So he did it with Ben Simmons. I think you're totally right about that. I don't know their paying situation. I think I would just, if I did this, I'd cut ties with Doc Rivers too, because he's not a rebuilding coach. I think we both agree he's not really a coach.
He's making so much money. They're paying so many coaches right now.
I know. I mean, the Pistons are, if the Pistons can do it, but that's I guess those are trickle down effects. At the end of the day, I think this is going to get gross. You actually changed my mind. I didn't think they'd have the nerve to pull the trigger. I still don't this year, but I do think Giannis, if we want to kind of segue into my bold predictions, I do think Giannis is gone after this summer. I mean, you can give the qualifier because in this day and age, you really truly don't know. The Pacers were in the conference finals last year. A couple people get hurt. They make a run to the conference finals, and it's like groove. we're gonna try it again next year. But
that lack of effort last night.
Barring that, God, last night.
And by the way, if they lose to both games to the Cavs, who are playing great basketball, if they're suddenly 1-6, and then you have the Utah, the Knicks, and the Celtics. I mean, the wheels could come off early.
Bill, I always look at. I really think joy is palpable. You can tell. You mentioned it earlier with Oklahoma City. You can tell the teams that enjoy playing together, and you can always tell the way that teams play when they're not shooting well. Like, let's take the juxtaposition of Golden State is interesting. The way that they played the last two games against New Orleans, when Steph was out, Wiggins was out, Melton was out. They got down by 20 in the first game. Man, the way Podziemski keeps flying around, the way they keep getting offensive rebounds, the way Draymond keeps defending, the spirit is up. They're picking each other up off the floor. The bench is up, even when they're not shooting. When Damian Lillard goes ice cold last night, goes 1 for 12.
That was the Knicks last year.
That's right.
Right? Like, they all love each other. Right. All right. To that exact point, I'm going to transition on Doc from my reporter mode to my sort of educated opinion mode. And full disclosure, we have a bunch of people watching. I am not a Doc Rivers guy. Now, that's based on reporting experience, not just sitting on my couch.
I mean, get in line.
But I've been on this for a while. Dude, go back to the Clippers days when I reported that DeAndre Jordan didn't want to play with Chris Paul, and Doc Rivers called me a liar every day by name.
Yeah. Right? This is one of those things where, like, you let time pass and then you're proven right. Like, everyone's in line now.
That's the thing about being, like, if you're a reporter, you don't have to get lucky. You just have to play out the string. So let me just transition here from being told that everyone in the NBA think that Giannis is going to be available if things go badly in Milwaukee, to I think another ingredient that I couldn't get nailed down, but I think I'm just going to give my educated opinion. I have no doubt that Giannis probably was excited about Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers is charismatic. He is charming on the surface in the beginning. But I suspect, like a lot of other players who have played for Doc Rivers, and a lot of people who have worked for him, many of whom I've talked to, many of whom in the last 24 hours, I think it's very possible that Giannis is starting to come to the realization that Doc Rivers isn't just not the solution; he's part of the problem. My view is that Doc Rivers throws people under the bus, that the environment gets toxic, that he plays politician in any office. If you see a guy acting one way to the people beneath him and another way successful to the people above him, right? Guy manages up well but treats you badly. You sort of view that person in a certain way. I think it's going to get worse between Giannis and Doc. I think Giannis is going to realize, or is starting to realize, and I don't have this reported, I just have it speculated, my speculation. I think Giannis is going to get where a lot of guys have gotten, where he goes, Doc's a problem. Like, forget Damian, forget the lack of defense, forget Doc is a problem, and he's kind of throwing me under the bus, and he's not really helping, and these practices don't make sense, and he doesn't have a solution. He's more worried about what the owner thinks about him, and man, he's really going after the front office. And that is a recipe to speed up, to add fuel to the fire, for all the other reasons Giannis saying, bleep this, I'm out of here. So I think it increases the odds.
You know who from the outside, who Doc Rivers reminds me a lot of is Mark Jackson, the old Warriors coach.
Oh, interesting.
In that really their biggest strength as a coach is not that they do really smart X's and O's stuff. They're motivators. They're motivators. They go in.
I think they're politicians.
And
they don't motivate everybody.
But if, in terms of their coaching acumen, the biggest strength they have is that they're motivators. And you're right. The other connections are because they're not X's and O's guys. They're not guys that are going to go out and out tactician you. But they'll try to get in the huddle and say fiery things. And after the game, say, we just need to play better and be this tough old school accountability guy. But behind the scenes, they're moving these levers. And Mark Jackson burned his way out of Golden State by doing this up the ladder, down the ladder. He was always politicking, and he always had an excuse. He always, when things weren't going well and they had the 12th ranked offense behind Stephen Curry, they should never have a 12th ranked offense. He said he blamed it on the last 20 years. Oh, you've never seen basketball like this. Well, we've never had Stephen Curry. And he never took accountability. He didn't let his assistant coaches talk to the media. And he always wanted all the credit for himself when it was good. And when it went bad, it was never his fault. And Doc Rivers feels a lot like Mark Jackson to be that when the big puffy motivational words wear out and you actually have to be a basketball tactician and that doesn't work, then who does the accountability fall on? And it has never fallen on Doc. He's never taken responsibility for that. I don't think he's a particularly good tactician. And I think he
wouldn't let Jerry West in practice, right? Like, wasn't that a thing?
That's right. And so to your point, when things start going bad, they get very defensive. Yep. And I could see him burning his way out of Milwaukee or through Giannis. And maybe that's the way they convince themselves they can get this right, is to get a new coach. I mean, stay on the carousel. But I don't know. But I think that Giannis, you've convinced me. I think Giannis is out of there by next summer or by the summer. I still don't think it'll happen this year.
All right, let's do this. So let's transition to bold predictions with your bold prediction 1 year from today. November 1st, 2025. Giannis Antetokounmpo is wearing what jersey? It's hard. This isn't unfair. It's a hard question.
It is. From a basketball stand, it has to be the Thunder. It has to be the Thunder. It has to be the Thunder. They have too much. If Milwaukee does this right and they want the best thing, they want the best return. Nobody can beat OKC. And on the flip side, where Giannis, forget where he wants to live or party or whatever he likes about New York. From a basketball standpoint, I just don't see how you could marry the two. There could be any better situation. It seems like these guys don't always end up, other than Anthony Davis, the Lakers, it doesn't always end up in the places you feel are obvious. Right. But Oklahoma City, to me, from a basketball standpoint, and I would slip Golden State in there because my second bold prediction is that Golden State is going to make a move. I don't think they would get Giannis. I don't think those young guys have quite the value. I don't think they have quite enough picks to entice Milwaukee enough to get off that kind of player. But I do think my second thing is so I'm going to say that next year Giannis is wearing an OKC jersey, and my another bold prediction is that this year Golden State's going to make a big move. I don't know if it's for Jimmy Butler's the guy that I have in the back of my mind, but they're a 3-for-1 trade waiting to happen. They're a good team that has viable pathways to becoming great. I think they make a big move.
Let me do a quick bold prediction follow-up on Giannis with the Thunder. Let's say that, okay, so Jalen Williams for me has to go in that deal.
Yeah.
It's Jalen Williams and probably some other guys and a lot of picks. But let's say that Jalen Williams is the main guy that goes. Mm-hmm. If Giannis is a member of the Thunder a year from now and Jalen is in Milwaukee, how many championships are the Thunder winning with that group?
Oh, God, if they kept Chet.
3? Yeah, Chet, Shea, and Giannis are like locks.
Okay, so what you would do is you would put the over-under at 2.5. And I would still take the under. I think they would win 2. I think
a lock at 1. A lock. They win a championship.
Definitely. And that's the thing. That's for all the work that Presti has done with OKC, and they're probably still going to win one at some point. But you just can't guarantee.
Yeah, I agree.
You can't. The league is too deep. There's too much talent. Too many weird things happen. I think if they want to, you can't guarantee anything. But if they want to get as close as they can to saying all this is going to pay off in a championship, I still think that there
It's
might
like adding Durant to the Warriors.
Yeah.
The Warriors already had won one, but it's just now it's not fair.
End all debate. Yeah, I really, really do think. And if they did it, I would put the over under at 2.5, and I would bet under. But it certainly would not be out of the realm of possibility. And I think Giannis is a guy. I know he can't shoot, but in terms of physicality, I think he's got 5, 6, 7 more years.
You do. That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, if he has 5 or 6 or 7 more years, you give everything. Even 4 years, which he does have.
You have to account for gradual decline. Like, no, when he's 36, he's not going to be 30. But it's like Steph. Like, he's going to be a player that can be a tent pole of a championship for at least 5 or 6 more years. I believe
Steph's
that.
Shooting, obviously, in ball, like the guy creates. I mean,
I know, but you're just seeing this when the way guys take care of themselves, and
and Giannis does.
There's a longer window.
He also doesn't have to carry a team as much. The wear and tear can be less. Like he doesn't have to play 44 minutes and score whatever. Non-bowl prediction: if Giannis stays in Milwaukee, I don't think he's going to. They do not win another championship with him. I think the disaster. All right,
move the bold from that.
It's over, man. Do you want to do another bold prediction or two before we get to team of the night, or do you feel bold enough? Do you feel like you've been emboldened to be bold?
Warriors make a move. Giannis is on OKC. Okay. I think another prediction I would make, and I don't think this is particularly bold, but the Knicks are about to go on a run. They started off shaky. Yeah, Karl Anthony Towns was only taking 9 shots a game through the first 3 games. When you watch them play, he was very hesitant to sort of assimilate himself to that team, and he was deferring too much. He finally got going the other night because he decided that any space I see, mid-range, post, and Tom Thibodeau talked about after the game. They liked what they saw from him in the post early, but they weren't giving him enough volume down there. Scored 8 points in the post in his last game out, and once they got him going inside, he stepped out to the line. He was in the mid-range, 44 points. Jalen Brunson found him. This was an interesting stat. Jalen Brunson had only passed the ball, not assist, had only passed the ball to Karl Anthony Towns through 3 games, 22 times. Little more than 7 times a game, he just passed the ball to him. They weren't connected enough. 20 passes and 5 assists from Brunson to Towns in the last.
He was obviously conscious of
exactly. I got to get him.
My job to get him feeling right.
Unlike Doc Rivers, in his post-game comment after Karl Anthony Towns only had 8 shot attempts, Brunson said, "I'm the point guard. I've got to have eyes for him. I got to get him the ball in his spot."
Real leadership.
And he did it. And I think when that chemistry starts to click with that perimeter defense, I think the Knicks are about to become the team we all thought they were going to be. So I'll say they're going to go on a run.
It's a great prediction because we can talk about the Bucks, small sample size, but it doesn't really add up. They were together last year. Doc came in January and he's under 500. Karl Anthony Towns has only been on this team for a minute. Yeah. LeBron and that Heat team in 2010, which I covered, so I always reference this one. I was there. They started 9-8, and right. LeBron tried to get Spoelstra fired.
That's right.
That's a real, and it's not the only example of hell. When LeBron went back to Cleveland, everybody forgets this. That first year where they made the finals under Blatt, they didn't win, but they were under 500 in January. Yeah. Right. So it takes a while. I'm with you. The Knicks are going to figure it takes time. And Jalen Brunson, his leadership, his excellence, the culture there, it's going to speed up the process. It won't take 20 games or 40 games. It'll take 12 games. It might take 7 games. Might already be there.
And they've got They got a couple Wizards games, Pistons. I was looking at the schedule.
Is that right?
They're about to get some momentum going.
That's always nice when you can also just have the opposite of what the Bucks have coming up. Just have an easy road to kind of.
And that's what we're going to listen. I just wrote this last night. We're going to find out a lot about the Warriors coming up. They played some dog teams. They're about to play the Thunder, the Celtics, and the Cavs coming up all on the road. We're going to find out a lot about Golden State in the next week or two.
A lot of you predicted this. I can't remember who it was. Were you one of them? Like a lot of our colleagues, maybe you're one of them at CBSSports.com, had the Cavs second in the preseason prediction. I thought it was crazy.
I do like them as a regular season team because when they get to the playoffs, I think they're redundant when you shrink the rotation and you kind of go through a few more kind of tried and true options. But the variability of all this and the ability to withstand injuries and back up your most important assets.
You can be a better version of yourselves. Donovan can win you games. I mean, Donovan go out and get 55 points.
Oh yeah. No, the Cavs are a good team.
They're really good. Yeah. Team of the night for you. Well, we do this every single show at the end. What is I know mine, but I'll let you go first. What is your
Phoenix? Team of the Phoenix, my team.
Thanks, baby.
Dude, I told you guys This fourth quarter thing was not going to – they're a top 10 fourth quarter team already. They're top 3 in the clutch. I told you guys they're too good. Bradley Beal's going to bounce back. Bud is changing. They are taking – this is important. They're taking almost 6 3-pointers more per game this year than they did last year. The ball is moving more. We talk about joy. I knew that Bud was going to infuse some offensive life into this team, and they're simply too talented to be the worst fourth quarter team. They still rely on jump shots a little too much, even though they have 2 of the best mid-range jump shooters to ever play. I still think that can be an Achilles heel down the road, but there's just no way they're going to grind their gears the way they did last year. I don't like that they're having to come back in a lot of the games. They're digging big holes. They came back last night against the Clippers, but I like this Phoenix team. I love the way Tyus Jones ties it together as a point guard. I love Bud's effect, and I think I'm still standing by. I really believe Phoenix can be a top 4 seed.
That's bold.
I've really seen nothing to take me off of that. I love Phoenix, and I was super happy they came back. I'm silently kind of rooting for them.
It's a great pick. I'm gonna go Memphis, not just because they humiliated Milwaukee and made the timing of my story feel really fortuitous, but thank you for that. But because with the way the Ja played in that game, they reminded us that they might be, what are they, 3-3? They look like a 6-0 team. They look like a 5-1 basketball team. They're so good.
Ja threw the alley-oop from his ass.
Dude.
I mean, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the best part about that play, Bill, is he goes to the ground, and how often you see these guys go to the ground, people surround him, and they panic, they throw it to – this guy took like 3 seconds on the ground to survey the court, wait for the cutter along the baseline. It was incredible. And patiently throw the lob as if he was setting up a regular pick and roll.
He's a difference maker on a level that's 4 or 5 guys in the NBA. He is. Totally. It's easy to forget because of the injuries and the shenanigans and the time away. And look, Memphis vanished from any sort of relevancy last year for all these reasons and all these injuries. And guys, by the way, some guys didn't play yesterday. Bane didn't play yesterday, and I'm forgetting somebody else. I mean, Smart. This is a team that can also be a top 4 team. This can be a top 4 team.
Definitely.
And they're a championship level team if they can kind of figure stuff out. So team of the night for me, really good slate of games. Enjoyed the Giannis talk. Hope some of you watching it from Milwaukee and realize it's not personal. I'm just telling you, I'm just the messenger. I'm just the messenger. All right, Botkin, what do you got planned this weekend? Any big plans? We got to go, but any big plans? Just watching hoops?
Yeah, my dad just got in town from California, so we're gonna hang out and just watch basketball.
We're swapping states. My parents are coming tomorrow from Florida, so it's like a swap.
Oh, where do they live in Florida?
They are in Fort Myers.
Oh God, did they get hammered with the storm?
No, they barely missed it. They left for that though. They got hammered 2 years ago. Where they were. This time around, they were okay. They're in a little bit.
I would get off the west side of Florida. All these storms go up the Gulf now. I think the water's so warm. I don't know. They all come up. They all come to the southern tip of Florida, and we're all like, "Where's it going to go?" And it always goes to the Gulf now. So I'm on the ocean.
It's been a lot.
Yeah,
I'll tell them. I'll let them know. Yeah. Good stuff, Brad Botkin. I'm Bill Reiter. This is Beyond the Arc. This went a little long, but a lot of you are watching live. Appreciate everybody's time. We're back live noon Eastern on Monday. And of course, you can get us wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, have a great weekend, and thank you for hanging out here on Beyond the Arc.